Hello, I'm Laura Nelkin. I'm a knitwear designer. I live in upstate New York in the Finger Lakes region, and I am so excited because I have a new mystery knit along launching, and I haven't had a mystery knit along in 4 years. I had my first mystery knit along in Noble 10 years ago. I think it was in May of 2011. And I realized that this new mystery knit along, Open Minds Mystery Knit Along, is launching May 12th of 2021. So exactly 10 years, which is pretty exciting. If you don't know what a mystery knit along is, I have a whole blog post explaining it. But basically, you have no idea what you're knitting. You sign up for the mystery knit along by buying the pattern, which gives you your pre-clue, which basically is like how much yarn you need, what gauge you need to get, beads if you're going to use them, and you get yourself all set up. And then on May 12th, I'll be sending you out your first clue, and you'll follow the directions in the pattern and knit along with a whole slew of fun people, and you'll eventually be knitting a shawl. Some mystery knit-alongs, I don't tell you what you're knitting, and I tease you the whole time and have you think that you're knitting a thong for as long as possible. But this time, I'm going to tell you that you're knitting a shawl. This project could also be seen as a very big thong, I guess. It's quite large. I'm very proud of it. I spent a fair amount of this late winter and spring designing it and knitting it. I had a bunch of pent up mystery knit along energy that I channeled right into this design. I would say that this is not as challenging as some of the mystery knit-alongs that I've done before. The construction is quite unexpected, and that will keep you on your toes, but the stitches are quite easy. And I've even built in, starting with Clue 1, a simpler version and then a more complicated version. So if you are willing to have an open mind, you are going to have a great time with this project and end up with a shawl that you're really, really proud of. I'm thrilled to be sharing it with you. Another thing it's important to tell you about is that I have a phenomenal community of knitters who will all be knitting this shawl with you. There's a community on Facebook, there's a community on Ravelry, so wherever you're comfortable, you can join in with a group and knit and ask questions, post project pictures. We all really kind of goad each other along. It's very fun to see what yarns y'all are gonna choose, what color beads if you're using those, and everybody gets quite excited. There's always a little bit of enabling that happens, and building community through mystery knit-alongs is one of my favorite part of the processes. That was a weird word. Processes is not a word. It's one of my favorite parts of doing designs like this with you. Sometimes I lose my words when I do videos. So other things that are important for you to know is that every clue will have its own video that's just like this. So when the clue launches, there will also be a companion video that will teach you everything that you need to know for that clue. You're sure to learn a lot with Open Minds. I did a few new things in this. Nothing's overly crazy, but it's quite fun, and I'll keep you learning and moving as we move through it. So the first thing that I need to do in this video to get you going for Open Minds is show you all the materials that I use in Open Minds, and then kind of go through choosing color if you're going to go stash diving for Open Minds, and also look at bead color if you're using those, and then teach you a bit about working a gauge swatch if that's something that you haven't done before. So let's jump right in and look at all of the materials that you're going to need. Okay, it's time to talk about materials for your Open Mind. There are things you're going to need to have success with your Open Minds, and I'm happy to show you what all of those things are. I do have some kits available. I have a limited number of kits, so I'll be showing you how to choose color for your Open Mind if you decide not to get a kit and you want to go stash diving. So you've kind of got two options when we come to that. The first thing that you're going to need for your Open Minds is 1 skein of fingering or sock weight yarn. The yarn that I used is Spun Right Round Classic Sock. It is 100% superwash merino. It's 438 yards to 100 grams. So there are plenty of sock and fingering weight yarns out there that will work, but this is the one that I chose to use. I think there's going to be a lot of choices that you're going to be happy with for this. So that's the first thing you need, 1 skein. Then you need a set of 5 gradient skeins or another single skein. And I'll talk about that a little more in the next section when we talk about color. I used a set of 5 gradient skeins from Spun Right Round as well. She's a local-ish to me dyer. She's in Rochester, New York, and Renee is great, and I love her yarn, so I was happy to choose colors from her. So you'll get a set of 5 mini skeins. You can also use, if you have some mini skeins from an advent calendar or something like that, you might be able to go stash diving and find something pretty fun. This ends up equaling about 438 yards too. Each of these skeins is 87 yards. So that's the second thing that you're going to need. The third thing that you're going to need is some lace weight yarn. I used Midnasole, which is a new yarn from Kama Rose. It's 54% baby alpaca, 36% tencel, and 10% merino. I love this yarn. It is really similar to a mohair silk yarn, but I find the baby alpaca to be not quite as both warm and irritating. Like my skin tends to like baby alpaca for a lace yarn that has a bit of halo or fuzz. You might not have an issue with mohair, and so you could go with a mohair silk instead. But I absolutely love this Midnasole. This yarn is about 220 yards to 25 grams, and you're gonna end up needing 3 skeins of this. You won't end up using all of that, but you're gonna come close. Next up, if you are going to work with beads, you're gonna need about 40 grams of size 6 Japanese seed beads. So I just have some in a tin for you right here. And then with those beads, you're gonna also need a way to place the beads because the beads in Open Minds are placed on stitches. You won't be using the beads until clues 4, 5, and 6. So if you don't find beads right away or you don't wanna decide if you wanna work with them or not, don't worry about it. You can wait and find them in a little while. So you'll need a crochet hook or super floss or a beetle needle for placing those beads if you decide to work with beads. Next up, you'll need 2 double pointed needles. You're only gonna use these in clue 1, and you won't be using them again, but you will need them quickly in clue 1, as well as a crochet hook that you will also only use in clue 1 and won't do again. The crochet hook is very easy. Don't worry about it. There'll be a video if you're a knitter who gets nervous when you see that a crochet hook is involved in a pattern. Next, you are going to need 1 32-inch circular needle. You won't actually ever be using this needle in the round, so there's a pretty good hint for you. You'll be working flat the whole time. You want it to be 32 inches long. I used a US size 5 needle, but you'll end up using whatever size needle you get gauge with, and we'll talk about that at the end of this video. And finally, and this is really important, you need some kind of digital scale. I guess you could have a non-digital scale if you have an accurate one on hand, but I have this little tiny pocket scale, and I think this cost me about 10 bucks on Amazon. You could try to find one locally as well. And this digital scale you'll be using throughout the pattern to help you know when it's time to switch over to another color of yarn. So it's a very important tool for you to have to knit open minds. And I find as a knitter that I use my digital scale all the time. And I think if you don't have one and you get one for this pattern, you're gonna find that you'll start using it a lot. It's a great way of helping you get an idea of how much yarn an inch of knitting takes if you're trying to figure out how long you want to make a sweater or how wide you can make a scarf. At the end of Open Minds, because I used my scale and the way that I've written the pattern, this is all I had left from the first Open Minds that I knit. I use the scale. You won't run out of yarn the way I've written the pattern. I've built in spots where there's like padding, so you're absolutely okay, but you're really getting the most out of your yarn, which I think is really fun. I did write Open Minds to also be a little smaller, so if you don't want it to end up being as big as it could be if you knit with all of this yarn, you could have some yarn left over as well. So that's gonna be an option that you have. I think it's really important with mystery knit-alongs when you don't know what you're knitting to give you options and choices to keep it fun and have you be in control of your knitting as well. I hope that makes sense to you. So it's time to talk about color. I love talking about color. I'm just gonna kind of reset and get ready to do that with you, okay? All right, I bet you have a lot of questions about choosing yarn for your Open Minds. And there's a few basic rules that will help you have success and ensure that you love your open mind in the end. I love your open mind. I love my open mind. This is gonna end up getting very groovy by the end of this. So I'm going to use this green example to give you an idea of those rules, and then I'll give you a few do this but don't do this for color choice ideas. So this skein is called the MC. Your gradient kit is called the MS, and then your lace yarn, check this one out, is the LY. So that's how I refer to these three different yarns in the pattern. The rules are that when you look at your gradient of your mini skeins, you'll probably have a light end and a dark end. You want your MC to contrast with the light end of your gradient set, and you want your LY to contrast with the dark end of your gradient set. And then you want your MC and your LY to contrast with each other. So those are the basic rules. If you end up with these two being too close together, they're not gonna play off of each other well. There's some points in the pattern where the contrast on these two yarns is really important. If you're ever not sure if your two yarns have enough contrast to them, take a picture with your phone, put your phone on grayscale, your camera on your phone, and look at those two yarns, and you'll very quickly see if their value is too similar and they're not going to contrast with each other. So that's a great trick that I use all the time. And then you can see with this green yarn, I've got really nice contrast going across the beginning part of that gradient. And I've got really nice contrast going across the end of that gradient. So everything's going to play really well together with this. I hope that makes sense. Your other choice when you're looking at your gradient set is to just use a solid skein of yarn. So I could like take all of these other skeins out of here and make an absolutely beautiful open mind that your MC and your LY contrast, and then your MC and your MS contrast right there, and your LY and your MS contrast. So that is another option for you. If you don't want to work with a gradient set, you would just get a 438 yard skein for your MS instead of working with the gradients. The other thing that you can do is I want to show you what wouldn't work because I think that's important. So this shawl that I'm wearing, Trapeze, which is one of my mystery knit-alongs from, I forget what year it was. I'm not even going to pretend that I remember, but it was a while ago. I love it. I found it in a bin and I've been wearing it a lot lately. If I took this green yarn and I was like, maybe I'll do it with a yarn like I used in trapeze. I think this is patina from Madeline Tosh Fibers. You can see that they don't have a lot of contrast to each other. The colors are a bit different, but if you put these two yarns next to each other and you walked away from them and then you squinted, you would see that they would completely zhuzh together into one color. And it's not worth doing the way the colors play off of each other in open minds. It's not worth doing that if you're gonna end up not seeing the difference between the two yarns. A yarn that would work great with this green is like this purple side. This is a Magpie Fibers. I think this is called, I want to say it's called Rusty Beaver, and I know it's not called Rusty Beaver, but I think it should be called Rusty Beaver. This green and this purple play off each other beautiful, and that would make an absolutely gorgeous open mind. So that's another option. The purple on a Noble and this green, great. You just want all of the colors of your MS, your MC, and your LY to coordinate beautifully together and not be discordant. So this is a great place that my Facebook group and my Ravelry group come into play, because as you go stash diving and as you start to look at what you have, or you go to your local yarn store and you're looking for yarns, you can post photos about what you're thinking about using, and we can all help you make decisions. Definitely I'll chime in because I know what your final project is going to look like, and I promise not to steer you wrong as you're looking at things. It's actually one of my favorite part of Mystery Knit-alongs is this kind of like yarn shopping time. We've got almost a month until we cast on together. So you might end up having yarn for more than one Mystery Knit-along before we even get started. That has happened more than once with my Mystery Knit-alongs. So once you have your yarn, the other thing I want to say about LY is you can work with a non-fuzzy yarn. So if you want to work with a smooth lace weight yarn, just choose a light fingering or lace weight yarn that isn't like a cobweb, is more of a like 700 or 800 yards for the lace weight yarn. And you can use that instead of using a yarn that has mohair or baby alpaca in it. That's absolutely fine. So that's another option for you. Definitely let me know if you have any questions with yarn picking. I know it's overwhelming when you don't know what you're making, but it's also really fun and it makes it uniquely yours. All right, once you have your yarn chosen, it's going to be time to choose beads. The beads don't play a huge role in open minds. They're used in clues 4, 5, and 6, and there's not a lot of them used compared to other mystery knit-alongs I've done. Like if you've knit Kinetic, I think Kinetic had like 1,800 or 1,600 beads in it. This is just a sparkling and a smattering of beads. If you're somebody that loves adding beads to your knitting, I think the way that they highlight some of the stitches in open minds is really beautiful, so I encourage you to use them, but you certainly don't have to. This is the bead that I chose for this colorway of open minds, and you'll see that the bead that I chose is a green bead with a silver lining. I'm just going to move these out of the way because all of the beads are used on your LY. So when you are thinking about a bead color, you're just working on that bead color with your LY. What you want to make sure is that your beads show up on your LY, and you can see that these green beads, because they have that silver lining and that little bit of that rainbow finish, they sparkle beautifully on the green, but they also aren't so contrasty that they pop too much from the green. So personally for me, when I choose beads, I like them to coordinate and kind of like sparkle and pop a little bit on my yarn, but not be like, I'm a red bead and I'm on white yarn. Like I don't want your beads yelling at you. You want them to have a level of subtlety to them, but you also don't want them to be so subtle that you can't see them on your yarn. So again, this is another great place once you figure out your yarns. If you're not sure what bead color would work on your LY, I love going bead shopping for you. We've got a great resource of beading stores in my Ravelry group. We'll point you in the right place. I'm not sure if you have a local bead store or not. Most people, there aren't that many local bead stores out there anymore, but I have some great online resources as well, and I will help you get a bead that will work beautifully on your open minds. This part is so fun, helping you shop. I love it. So that's beads, not too hard. There's size 6 beads. I use Japanese seed beads. You could also use Czechoslovakian beads because you're placing beads on this project. And for that beading tool, you're gonna wanna have a small crochet hook or a beetle needle or some super floss for placing the beads. There will be a video to show you how to do that when we get to that step. So once you've gone shopping, it is time for you to do your gauge. So let's go over that because this is a really important step for you to have success with your open mind. All right, it is time to talk about gauge. I know I said open minds is a shawl, and typically you wouldn't worry about doing gauge for a shawl because it's gonna fit somebody. But because of yarn usage with this pattern, I think it's important to do gauge so that your fabric comes out similarly to the way my fabric did. I got a gauge of 25 stitches and 32 rows over 4 inches. And I have some tips and tricks in the pattern on how to work gauge successfully. The first thing you're gonna wanna do is cast on about 30 stitches and knit at least 4 inches. You're gonna wanna use your MC for this, and you've got plenty of MC, so don't worry about using some of it for your gauge swatch and it not being in your shawl. I've allowed for that in the pattern. So cast on 30 stitches, knit about 4 inches. The pattern calls for a US size 5 needle. If you know that you are a loose knitter, you're gonna wanna go down a needle size. If you know that you're a tight knitter, you're gonna wanna go up a needle size. For example, I'm a somewhat loose knitter, so I actually knit my open mind on a US size 4, and one of my test knitters who tests for me all the time is a much tighter knitter than I am. She almost always goes up 2 needle sizes from what I suggest on the pattern. So the needle size on that front page of your pattern is always just a suggestion, and you're gonna wanna kind of learn how you knit and then choose a needle size, and don't be disappointed if you don't get gauge the first time and you need to try again. I think the more you knit my patterns, the more you'll have an idea of which needle size you use for my patterns versus what I use for my patterns. So after you've knit your swatch, you want to take your swatch and you want to wet it in some warm water, and then you want to squeeze it out and like roll it up in a towel to get any extra moisture out of it, and then lay it down flat without stretching it out too much. Just kind of take that swatch and lay it out flat. I like to use my ironing board for this step because things dry very quickly on your ironing board, and then just walk away. Don't measure it at this point because your measurement will not be correct when it's wet. And then come back to your swatch and then measure it once it's dry. And what you'll do is take a gauge ruler and put it over your swatch in the middle, away from the edges. And then you're gonna count your stitches and you're going to count your rows. Sorry, I should get that a little more in the middle if I'm being really correct here. Your goal is going to be to get 25 stitches over 4 inches and 32 rows over 4 inches. I would say that stitch gauge matters more than row gauge, so go for that with this pattern. That's another hint for those of you who are like constantly looking for little hints as I get to each step of this mystery knit along. It's fun to start seeing people guessing. It's gonna be a thong, it's always a thong. It's never a thong, it's a shawl this time. So I think that that's everything that you need to know. Remember, there are some kits in my shop. I don't know how long those are gonna last. I'm happy to help you choose beads and yarn. I'm so excited to be doing a mystery knit along with you again. I already have an idea for another one percolating up there. I wanna get back into the rhythm of doing them again. That was a nice long break, and I am ready to have an open mind with you guys again. I will see you guys in the forums. Don't forget to ask questions. I'm here to help you.